Alright, let's see if we can move this to the other. Oh. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Cheesy Bites. Today we're looking at the IQUNIX Super 1+1 TKL. This big chunker of a board has a lot of interesting ideas. Whether those work out though, well, we're gonna have to find out. First, let's get some basics out of the way so you get an idea of what we're dealing with here. This gasket-mounted TKL board is from IQUNIX Super. Yes, you heard that right, not to be confused with the regular IQUNIX, which makes those very popular mechanical keyboards you see all around the web, you know, like the OG80, which even made it into some popular YouTube videos.
Oh, behave.
This year, they decided to branch out and fully embrace the custom world with their take, and thus IQUNIX Super was introduced. The first boards out of the gate were the Zone X75 and the Tele 60, and up next as well, this beauty here, the 1+1 TKL. Now if you're wondering why it is called 1+1, according to the brief I got, the first one stands for IQUNIX Basic Layout, while the second one refers to your individual needs.
What do you want?
If you think that's too cheesy, good, because this is what this channel is about. But in a nutshell, it's supposed to cover your typing needs, and with a TKL meaning 10 key less, which refers to a full-sized board without the numbers cluster here, we're off to a great start, as it should be plenty for most users and more. Because due to the lack of spacing between the F keys, you know, normally you have a gap every 4 keys, we have 2 extra ones on the top here, the F13 and a dedicated play-pause button. The whole board is made out of this beautifully machined aluminum, weighing in at about 4 pounds or 1.83 kilograms fully built, and the color you see here is called primary. There are 3 more to choose from, that is pure white, creamy white and Alice blue. Like this one though, those will be uniform, which I think does look really nice. It's not that I don't like this patriotic combination, but I usually enjoy less contrasting colors. I say usually because this kinda grew on me, and I think the pictures, as it usually is the case, don't really do it justice. I'm not sure how well this will translate in video form, but the board is a little less vibrant in person than on the pictures, and that's a good thing. It doesn't look as in your face, it's a bit more subdued, and they also did a great job matching the blue from the keycaps to the blue from the case, but I'll talk more about that later. The keycaps, that is. Something else that I also can't stop thinking about is the fact that the colors just really remind me of the USPS. You know, the United States Postal Service. There's even a GMK set called Parcel that uses very similar colors as well. It would probably look really great on this board too. Anyway, if we flip the board around, we can have a look at the really nice base, which lifts it up to its 6.5 degree typing angle. In the middle we also have a large 1+1 sign, which is a little bit crooked, but since this is a prototype, I'm hoping that they will fix this in the final version. I don't know why, but I really like this base. It looks clean but also functional, as it has the benefit of making the board very easy to pick up because you got something to hold on to, unlike other boards. I know it's not something unusual, but I just really like the way that this looks. While we're at the back here, we can also have a peek at what's behind, which is a wireless switch. I feel like these are starting to show up more and more on expensive boards, so for all those lovers of no wires, this one can do it, but it also comes at a price, the price of not being QMK compatible. As I probably say in most of my videos, I really love using VIA or VIAL. They are just really easy to set up and configure your board to your heart's content. The wired version of this, which also exists by the way, will support it though, but for those that want a clutter-free life, IQUNIX does have something up their sleeve, and it's called Driver. No, not that driver, I mean IQUNIX driver. Similar to how the wireless boards from QK have their own proprietary software, so does this one here. At first glance, it shares quite a few elements with VIA and its siblings. We got full per key remapping, a total of 4 layers to set up, RGB customization, including an option to paint whatever you want on the board itself, but unlike Angry Meow's version where you can create animation, this one is limited to a single color per key. It would also be nice to have a color wheel instead of these individual RGB fields. There's also a macro record function, which is pretty cool. I like that even if I never use it, and one thing that I'm not sure I've seen on other boards before, but you can remap the special functions as well. What I mean by that is you can, for example, assign the Bluetooth profiles to different keys, so you can switch between them without using the function key, for example. I think that's pretty cool actually, something I'd prefer on other boards as well. Again, I'm not sure if I just missed this up until now, or if this is actually the first one that has it. There are also a few default applications like the calculator, which you can assign to a button as well, but no option to launch a custom one. And the software is still in an early state. There are some missing translations and some icons are funny, but maybe not very lawyer-friendly if you know what I mean. And I'm not sure what this button does, but I think it says complete extinction, which I'm afraid to click. What the heck. Live a little, right? Let's see what... Anyway, back to the underside, which contains 4 rubbery feet and a whole bunch of hex screws that hold everything together, but more about those in a minute when we take it apart. Moving back to the top, the caps you see here are not included by default, but can be purchased separately, or if you place your order within the first 7 days of the group buy, you'll actually get them for free. However, there's only this color scheme available, meaning if you opt for one of the alternative ones like the creamy white version, you will still get these, as there won't be a creamy white version unfortunately. But the caps are actually really nice. They match perfectly with this version of the board and have very crisp and readable legends due to their double shot construction. They're made of PBT, and one thing in particular that I really enjoyed is their slightly rounded edge. If you compare them to PBT fans or GMK caps for example, the edge is just the tiniest amount softer. It's really hard to see, and I only noticed it when this set was fully applied and the light was hitting it just right. So if you do go for the primary color, I'd highly recommend picking up this set as well, or just getting it within the first 7 days of the group buy. The only criticism I have is that these have to be the world's tightest caps ever. In fact, whenever I needed to pull one out, I was scared of ripping the entire PCB out of the frame. These are definitely in there, and I really mean that. The spacebar also seems to be having some sort of form issue. If you look at the lower right half here, you'll see that it's a bit warped and looks as if it went for the extra slice of pizza. But again, this is a prototype and I hope they'll iron this out because the caps are otherwise sublime. Alright, let's wrap up the surface dwelling because I'm sure you're all giddy to take a look inside. On the left side here we have what looks like 3 LED indicators, but it's actually just one, used for caps lock, status, battery life and wireless connectivity. The way that they look makes you almost think that they were buttons, but no, they're just LEDs. They can't hurt you. But they will show you Bluetooth or 2.4 GHz wireless connectivity because yes, of course, this is one of those multi-profile boards as we saw in the, driver section before. At least the wireless variant is. There's actually one thing that I really liked about how it handles these profiles. If you're hopping between operating systems like me, it's really cool that the Bluetooth profile will actually remember your settings per profile. So for example, using function tab, you can switch between Windows and Mac mode, which will be indicated by the LEDs on the left. Now, if you set your profile 1 to Mac and switch to profile 2, which is connected to your Windows machine, and set it to Windows mode, the profile will remember this, so there's no need to do a constant OS switch on the board, which is a wonderful quality of life feature that you don't get on every wireless board these days. The same goes for the 2.4 GHz mode, by the way. It'll also save its state, so if you have that one set to either operating system, it'll remember it as well. Despite the impression that this board might give you and that there's a matching keycap set, do not be fooled. This is not a pre-build and thus the board will not come pre-assembled, and neither did mine, so this is kind of a reverse thing here, but it's more about how this was put together and how the individual parts are made and fit than a step-by-step guide. That being said, this board has an unusual amount of parts, but little spoiler here, it's not more complicated than others. Let's start off by taking these super tight keycaps off. If you flip the board on the back, we got a total of 12 hex screws holding everything together. By the way, you'll be getting a rather sublime screwdriver with this, and I must admit I was too dumb at first to realize that all the bits were stored in the handle. I even ended up writing IQUNIX asking where the bits went, and then, well, they pointed out my stupidity. They're actually pretty nice and held in magnetically. I usually am against including tools and extras as I often find that they'll end up in the trash anyway, but these might just be worth keeping. But let's get to the opening of this thing, and here's one of the first negative points I have to give out. 2 of the screws are hidden beneath the rubber feet. This isn't the worst thing in the world, but if you plan on taking it apart or modifying or playing around with it frequently, this is a bit annoying. They do include 2 extra ones in case you rip out the glue, but I suppose this could have been avoided. After you have all the screws removed, you have to start with the base first, as it is hiding some more screws. With the wireless version, this is also where the battery or the batteries are stored. You actually get 2 of these, and they are each 2000 mAh, which is pretty big actually. Usually you get 1 of them or something in between. I didn't use the board long enough to reach the end of it, but assuming it lasts like most other boards, you won't have to charge this that often. The batteries also just sit here, which is great because they can easily be removed, but if you shake the board, you can clearly hear them rattling. Now, during normal operations, you will never ever hear this. In fact, I don't even think this should be of any concern, but as I will be getting into it at the end of this video, it is something that I think should have received a little bit more attention. By the way, if you're running macOS Sonoma, that is the new version where you get widgets, there is this official battery one which will show you Bluetooth connected devices and their charge level. This is actually pretty cool and much more detailed than any of the indicators you get on the board itself. But let's get back to the board. I used a pair of plastic pliers to push the batteries out and also disconnect the little ribbon cable that connects the wired and wireless switch. If you take a closer look at that one, there's another nitpick I have. I found that switching between the modes was a little harder than I would have liked it to be, and if you look closely you can see that the switch doesn't have any rails or support and tilts a bit when you push it, and I think it creates a bit of unnecessary tension. Again, this is a very tiny nitpick, but maybe this can be sorted out in the future. Alright, after the removal of the base, there are an additional 5 screws that hold onto the top frame. Once you've removed those, the base can be lifted up to reveal, well, quite a few layers of foam. We got 2 in the case as well as 2 between the PCB and the plate, which we'll get into in a second. If you take a closer look at the individual parts, I find one outstanding piece is the grey bottom one, which has one of the thinnest sheets of aluminum that I have ever seen on a board. Now, this isn't something bad, I just found it very interesting because normally all the parts and customs are super thick, so it's pretty cool to see and, well, it's very well made. The second part is the little cluster element which is on the right side of the board when flipped around. This is held together by the little logo badge. One notable thing here is that on my prototype unit, if I screwed it in as much as I could, the 2 elements would end up bending upwards. I would advise against doing this as it creates unnecessary tension if you tighten them back into the frame, as if to pull them from the other side. I didn't try this due to fear of breaking it, so I just left the badge screws a little loose and there's no rattling or any other noticeable issues when doing that. I hope they address this in the final version, otherwise the parts are really nicely made and I only have one visual issue with the board, and that is these 2 pins that are used to help set the top frame in place. If you look at the board from the front or the back where the other pin is, it looks as if it's a bit chipped, which is actually not the case. This is the tiniest of cosmetic issue, but at this price point I kinda would expect better. This is also the moment where I want to talk about a feature or potential feature that unfortunately doesn't exist. You see, when I first saw this board and this color separated thing on the right here, I immediately thought this was modular. It's not, which isn't something that's out of this world. There have been plenty of boards that featured some sort of modularity that let users change the layout on a hardware level. For example, the Tenet, which came out last year, where you essentially flip the entire PCB to turn it around, or others that let you change smaller elements. This wouldn't have been impossible here, but is unfortunately not doable. The way the base is machined and the way that the plate is aligned doesn't allow the elements to move over. In my opinion, this could have been a deciding factor in pushing this board beyond the ordinary. Not that it is, I think this does have some special sauce, but it could have been more, especially with the marketing stating that it matches your needs. This could have been exactly that. But let's move on. Per default, the OnePlus One will ship with an FR4 plate, but you can also get an extra palm or aluminum one. The 2 I got both had plenty of flex cuts, with the FR4 having some nice details, but again, this could be a prototype limitations. Maybe the palm plate will also have some more nice detailing. I also recorded sound demos on both, so you can hear for yourself later on. The gaskets are sticking out in the usual little ears manner around the plate and give the board a pleasant amount of flex. In general, I found this one of the more comfortable typing experiences. I think I mention this often, but this one too is, well, just really nice to type on. A few interesting bits again before we wrap this one up. The gaskets will come pre-applied in the final version, which I find unusual for a custom. The PCB and plate also have 2 layers of foam, with the one on the PCB being glued on. And lastly, the placement of the antennas is covered by these silicone tops, which I think looks kinda cool, but I don't think this was necessary, but it is a nice detail to clean up the look. But it's also not the first time I've seen antennas under the spacebar. Reasoning behind this is that this is a large, unobstructed area for the signal to reach out into the world, especially on these full aluminum boards. It's an elegant solution that looks a bit more seamless than having an extra cutout for the antennas. Alright, I think that covers everything and it is now time to take a listen. I will be using these Moonstone switches, which can be ordered with the board as well, for an extra $49. I normally don't like linears this light, but they do fit the board really nice, and I got a friend who probably would really enjoy these. They also have a very large magnifier for RGB, which makes the board glow up like a Christmas tree, and is a great moment to very briefly talk about that. We got the usual amount of modes and flashy things to cycle through, and every time I do that, I wonder why these customs ship with RGB. Does anybody really use this? I've never seen somebody spend this kind of money on a board and not immediately turn it off once they plugged it in. Anyway, let's take a listen. I find that the board has an overall very dense feel and sound to it, and the multiple layers of foam coupled with the 5 elements that make up the case contribute to this. Despite its size, it's very compressed, and it is something that I like both audibly and visually. I'm a sucker for wide boards, and I really like it if they are narrow and elongated, which isn't something that comes to mind when you think about the TKL, but here the composition of the keycaps coupled with the slim borders at the top and bottom create that look despite featuring more keys than most other boards. I also just like how it looks from the sides. Despite it being so simple, there's nothing out of the world going on here, but as many other boards before this one have proven, it doesn't have to. But this brings me to the final point where I find myself a little hesitant, and that's the price. The wired version will come in at $349 US, while the wireless version you see here will be $369, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. I don't know if I'm a bit overly sensitive with pricing these days. If so, please let me know. But in today's market where brilliant boards are getting cheaper and cheaper, you really have to do something special in order to justify a higher price. The board doesn't have to be better in the sense that it needs to be machined to utter perfection. It helps, but doesn't have to. No, in my opinion, it needs to justify it by being different enough to make me want to pay the price. The modularity would have been such a factor, but as we saw before, it's not part of the deal here. There are some rather nice extras that are included though. This has to be one of the most extravagant USB cables that I ever received for the board, which comes with one of these fancy connectors, and you also get the world's most premium keycap and switch puller that has quite a bit of heft to it. You also get the already mentioned screwdriver, and you will get a set of screw-in stabilizers, and of course all the layers of foam you could ask for, which some manufacturers still charge extra for some reason. You even get this semi-transparent shortcut sheet made of plastic, again, probably one of the most extravagant versions of its kind, and I think there are definitely people who will really appreciate this, and it certainly makes the overall experience feel very, well, I hate to use the word, but it makes it feel premium.
Ew, but I like it.
But I'd rather have them invest more time and energy into the board itself than the extras. The packaging is pretty cool too, but I belong to those that will eventually try to put this into the recycling bin. But despite all my nitpicks, I must also say that this board feels really nice. It feels great to type on, and to my ears it sounds pleasant too, and if you can snag the keycaps, well, the price makes much more sense, as a set of this caliber can run you between 80 and 100 bucks. I mean, that GMK parcel set is 135, so taking that into account, the price might be reasonable. I think this could be one of those cases where it might not strike you at first, it won't get your immediate attention, but it might outlive its more flashy, extravagant competition in the long term. This just might be one of those good old reliable boards that you're happy to see every day. You know, like the United States Postal Service. Hey, thank you so much for watching the latest video. If you're interested, links to more information can be found in the description below. The group buy is set to run from August 24th to September 25th, with an estimated shipping date of November this year, which is a pretty short lead time, but since IQUNIX has been in the game for quite some time now, I'd say this is more likely than in other group buys. I also want to thank them for letting me try out the OnePlus Keep in mind though that my unit was a prototype, so there might be slight differences between what you saw today and what will be delivered in the end. They also didn't sponsor this video, they had no say, nor did they get a preview. All of the nonsense is of my own creation. Anyhow, have a good one, enjoy the last remaining days of summer, and see you soon in the next one. Bye bye.